Hey developers, welcome to CodeDev. My name is Mudassir, and in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use the .map method in JavaScript. So map is another array method. Now there are a lot of array methods, even the loop itself is useful. The purpose of this tutorial is not only to introduce you to the map method and tell you how it works, what parameters it takes and what it returns, but I will show you exactly, precisely, where and how and when you should use .map method, because you can easily get confused. We have a ton of methods in JavaScript that you can use with array, but map has to be my favorite method for certain reasons, and that I'm going to show you in this video. So without any further ado, let's get into the code editor and start coding. Okay, so first of all, I have a very simple setup. The index.html file takes this app.js file, and this app.js file is where we are going to code. And I have opened the web browsers. You can only see the CodeDev tool, the console. So just open up this page and go to the console and you should be good. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do here is I will create an array, and this will be a simple array of numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So a very simple array. Now this array is going to help us understand the map method. So let's call this array simple and then type dot, right? And then simply write map. This is how you use the map method, but there is more to it. First of all, the map method takes one parameter and it returns an array. So we need to save the result first. So let's create another const here, and this will be, I will call it new array, and this is equal to array.map. I hope this makes sense. A simple variable which saves the result of the array.map method, which makes sense, which means that this map method will return something, and that will be an array. Now the question is, what parameter? What does it take? The map method, it only takes one parameter, and that is a function. You cannot pass it an integer or array. You need to pass it one function. So let me write a simple callback function here, and let's open that up. So there we have a very simple function, and for now you can do anything here, but I will simply say console log, and one more thing here. What are we going to console log? By the way, you shouldn't console log within the map method. This is just to make you understand how it works. So it accepts a function, that's one thing. Now this function can accept a few things, right? So map takes the callback function, and what it is going to do, it is going to take each element from the array that we are calling the map function on. It will take each element. So we have 5 elements here. So it will take each of the 5 elements, and then it is going to pass all of those elements to this function. So the first thing this callback function accepts is the number itself, or the element itself. So let's call it element. And down here, let's just simply console log the number that the element that we just passed to this function. And here you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which means that this function has access to each number right here. And on each iteration, it is console logging the number. Hope that makes sense. But besides this number, it can accept 2 more parameters, and the second parameter is the index. Index means the index of each element. So the first element will have 0 index, the second will have 1, and so on. And then the last thing is the array itself. So let's say if you want to use that array within this function, in that scenario, you're going to accept the array. Otherwise, the index and array are optional. You don't need to pass it. And in most cases, in fact, in all the cases, you will only be passing this element. You don't need to mention these second and third parameter here. But still, just to see how things work, let's console log both of them. So the first thing, in fact, within one console log, I'm going to write that. So the first element that I'm console logging is the element itself. Then we got the index and then the array. Now let's save that, and here you can see I have 5 outputs here. So 5 times it console logged, and the first element in the console log should be the element, and as you can see, it is the element. So 1 2 3 4 5 are the elements, 1 2 3 4 5 are the elements in the console log tool, so that is working perfectly. And then the second thing is the index, 0 1 2 3 4, so index of each element. So let's say we want to know the index of 4, which is 3, pretty simple, and the array will remain consistent, so it is constant. It is the same array that we are basically working on. Unless that array changes, it won't change. In fact, that cannot change either. And that's the next point. That's the next point we're getting to, so don't get too rushed here. So let's go ahead, instead of console logging. Now, why I'm removing console log? Because the map method, the purpose of it is not to console log. I mean, the purpose of it is to create a new array. And this is the most important point here. And let me show you why. So let's say, first of all, since I told you we don't need the second and third parameter, they are not required in any of the examples that I will do here today. But if you need them, you can go ahead with those. So let's say I want to do something with these numbers. So this function, so remember, what is a function at its very core? A function is something that takes an input, performs a function on that, right? So let's say this function is the double function. All it does, it multiplies a given number by 2. So in this case, what it will do here, it will multiply each number with 2. And then we need to return the result. Now, when we return the result, the return is very important, otherwise we'll get an error, and that I will show you later on. So let's go ahead and console log the new array. Let's save that. And now you can see we have 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. So 1 multiplied by 2 is 2, 2 multiplied by 2 is 4, 5 multiplied by 2 is 10. So we get this thing right here. So all it is doing basically, array map method, it is taking each element and then it is passing each element to this callback function, and this function is then doing something with that. The most important thing that, as I said here, is that it returns an array. It does not make any changes to this original array. If you expect that element multiplied by 2 will change the value of this array, you are wrong. It won't. In fact, it will create a new array from the existing array and then returns that array back that we here are taking it into the new array. So to demonstrate that, I will console log both. First, I will console log the original array and then the new array. And now if you see, this is the array and this is the new array. The array, even after the execution of this map method, is still same. It is still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This new array though is different. In fact, it is supposed to be different. That's how it was initiated. It basically is taking the result of the map method. So map is returning back an array, which is this one, and which is basically the result of it. Now the question here is, what if I don't return anything in the callback method, right? Let's say I do multiply the element by 2, but I don't return it. In that case, as soon as I click save, you can see here, we have the array, we have the 5 elements in the array, but all the 5 elements are undefined. Because what it is doing, it is mapping, and then it returns undefined. The function doesn't return anything. So it is still creating the new array, but each element in that new array is undefined. So that is why you need to return from that method. Let's say for each element, I want to return 8. Now you see, I get 8. You don't really need to use that element that you're passing. If let's say you want to fill an array, you have an array, which is this original array, and for some reason you just want to put something in it, like 8 in this case, you can use the map method. Okay, so now there are a couple more things you need to understand. First, you don't really need to define this function within the map method. The reason I'm saying that, let's say you take this function out and you create another function here. So this will be function, and let's call it double. So we have a function called double which accepts an element, or let's change the name from element to number. So a double function takes a number, multiplies it by 2, and then returns that number. We can call this double right here. So instead of defining the callback function, we can simply have another function that is outside of the map function, and then we can simply call that. and you can see the result is still same. Let me just comment this first one out, and you can see we still get the same result. It means that it is calling double, and as you can see, I'm not passing anything explicitly here. When I call a callback function, it automatically passes it 3 parameters, and those 3 parameters, again, the first one is number, second one is index, and the third one is array itself. But we are only concerned with the first one, which is the number, and that is perfect. So another thing here, so this is the simple function notation. There are a couple of ways to write function, right? And the second way to do is using the arrow function. So let's convert this function into the arrow function. So let's say const double is equal to number, and then I'm going to use this arrow notation and then the body of the function. If you use this arrow notation, there is one more thing. This is not really in the scope of this video. You see this error that the double is called before the initialization. Well, that is only because these arrow function, they need to be defined before we call them. So we are calling it here, so it should be defined before we call it, otherwise it won't work. But the normal function keyword, so any function you define with the function keyword, they work without any issue, even if you initialize them after you call them. So that is one thing. So now if I refresh, you can see that error is gone. The reason of showing it, if you get to see the map method called any of these ways, all of them are fine. You can simply call another map method, which is defined using the arrow notation, or the one that is defined using the function keyword, or simply a function that is defined as a callback function right here. All of them are fine. So this was the basics. Now it's time we move on to a bit complicated example. So let's move on to the example number 2. So in this second example, I have an array, and this time instead of number, we have the array of strings. So John, Jane, and Mark, these are 3 names, and we will use the map function and apply some function on these strings. So first of all, let's create a variable that is going to store the result of map function. So it will be const unames is equal to names dot map, and then I will call a method called capitalize, or in fact, instead of calling the method, I will simply take the element or the name within the function, so a simple callback function, and let's open up its body. And the reason I called it uname is I want to capitalize the first letter. So what it will do, basically, it will take each element and it will capitalize the first letter of each name. So right now all of them are in lowercase, so it will simply turn the first element into uppercase. So it is pretty simple. You are simply going to return, and we will take the name. So name basically represents each element. So consider it as first time it's John, second time it's Jane, and then Mark. When you're writing the function inside it, there is a very simple trick to keep in mind. Just take John, and consider right now we have John. So what I want to do with John, I want to take the name or John's very first index, and I want to turn that into uppercase. And there is a method called toUppercase, right? This one. And what it will do is it will take the first index, which is J. So name index 0 means just J. So it will take J and then convert J into uppercase. And let's console log this one and see how it is working. So let's take the uname and right at the end, simple console log uname, save that. And okay, let's also console log this one so we don't get to see the last one. So that's it. Okay, now you see JJM and all of them are in uppercase. So let's also concatenate that with this remaining part of the name. And how can we get the remaining part of the name? Well, if you don't know, there is another cool method, and that is name.slice. So basically what we need is a slice of a string. So we are going to take this slice, and this slice will take a couple of parameters, though we only need to pass one, and that is the index, from which index we want to create the slice. So I will basically create the slice from the first index. So I'll say 1. 1 means that from the first index or from the first element, we are going to take a chunk, and then I need to concatenate that. Sorry, dot is not the operator here, it has to be plus. And now if we save that, now you can see we get John, Jane, and Mark in uppercase or in the capitalized form. So this is how you perform on an array. You could do anything with this array. You know, let's say you want to change the first letter to, let's say, asterisk. Let's put that in the string and let's keep the rest of it. So save that, and now you can see the first element or the first character is asterisk, and then rest of it is same. So this is how you work with the map method on simple strings. Now let's take it one step further, and now we are going to work on simple objects, and after that we're going to make it even more complicated in our fourth example. So let's move on to the example number 3. Alright, so in this examples I have an array, and in this array I have 3 objects. So object 1 is this one, so a user with the name of John Doe and Jan Doe and Mark Doe. And then I have the user's age, so one is 30, then 17, 35, and then I have the address, and address itself is an object. So then example number 3 and 4 will be on this one. So this is a depiction of a more complicated data structure. So let's see what we can do with this. So our first challenge, let's create the first challenge, and that is we are going to take each user and we are going to return the name of each user in an array, right? So we are simply going to discard remaining properties here, and we will only take care of the first name and last name, and using first name and last name we will get the name of the user. So the result should be an array with John Doe as the first element, Jan Doe the second, and Mark Doe the third element. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll say users.map, and before we do that we need to create a variable that will store the resulting array, and that will be, let's say, names. So names is equal to users.map, and we're going to take each user in this one, and then we are going to pass each user to this arrow function. So if you remember last time we did this, we had this user, the parameter in this parentheses, but we don't really need that in case we only have one parameter. If you have multiple parameters, then definitely you can use that. So don't be confused by this. And now we are going to simply return, as always, return, and we will return a string. So this new array will not contain the object, but it will contain the string and string of names. So I'll say user.firstName concatenated by a space, and then user.lastName. Save that, and then let's go ahead and console log names. And there you go. Now you can see the result: John Doe, Jan Doe, and Mark Doe. Pretty cool, isn't it? So we had an array of objects. All we did, we took that each object, and we simply took the properties that we needed, and we created an array of string from that. Now let's move on to another example, which is going to be our example 4. And in this one, what I will do here, instead of just names, I will also contain the address of user. So this will return not only a string, but it will return an object, and that object will contain 2 properties: name, which will be combination of first name and last name, and then the address, which will access this nested object and show these concatenated by a comma. So let's go ahead and do that. So let me comment this out, and let's create a new const. I'll say mapped users is equal to users.map, and we're going to pass it the user. And within this method, what I need to do, I need to return, and not a string, an object. An object is represented by parentheses, so I'll return this object. And within this object, I'll have 2 keys. The first one will be name, and name will be equal to, again, first user.firstName plus the space, and then user.lastName. And we should be good for the first key. And let's also create the second key, which will be address. And the address will be equal to user.address.street plus user.address.city. And let's also concatenate with a comma. So there is a comma, space, and then the city. And let's go ahead and console log the mapped users. And now you can see we have the result and we have 3 objects. And if I expand this, you can see the first object, we have 2 properties. We have the address and we have the name. Name is John Doe, so first name, last name, and then the street, and then the city. Same goes for the second one. We have the name and we have the address. So this way you can take each element or each user in the array, and then you can do whatever you want to do with that. You can construct your own response, own result. This is very handy when you're dealing with API response. So when you make a call to an API, it will basically return you a JSON array, and within those JSON arrays you will have nested objects. From all that data you can take out the data that you need. So this is just an example of how easily you can manipulate using the map method. There is one more thing though that I would really want to show you, and that is, let's say besides the name and address, I want to do something else. Let's say I want to know if the user is legal or not. So if the user's age is 18 plus, he is legal, otherwise he is not. As you can see, I have 2 users, the 30 and 35, who are legal, and this one is not legal. So what I'll do here is I will create another property. So remember, this property is a custom property, didn't exist in our users array. So this will, let's say, is called is legal, and I will create an if statement here. So I'll say if the user dot age is greater than 18 or greater than equal to 18, then return true, otherwise it's false. So now if I save that and go back to my console, now you can see besides address and name, I have is legal. So first one is true, second is false, and third one is true. So this is how you can use complicated arrays and create new arrays from that with the data that you really need. And again, this is super useful when you're working with arrays and you're working with the APIs. You will love to play with map method with the response. It is such a nice tool. Watch this video maybe a couple of times until you fully understand the map. Once you fully conquer this map method, I bet you will be super fast in your coding. So what you can do really with this is you can take massive arrays of nested objects, and then you can turn or transform them into the data that you really need. So I hope this video was helpful. This is first of our JavaScript array series. I'll create more videos on other array methods, so filter, reduce, and all those. So if you want to learn about that, make sure you subscribe to this channel, like the video, follow me on Instagram, and just stay posted because I will be pushing a lot of content in coming days. Well, see you in the next video. I hope this one was helpful. If it wasn't, let me know in the comment down below. I will try to improve. Thank you so much for watching.